So Richard Allen, which many of you know from the Delphi case, Abby and Libby being the victims of a horrible, horrifically just violent crime that shook not only that little small local area, but many across the country because of the nature of the crime against two extremely young teenage females that were left in a position so disrespectful that just rips your heart out of your chest. But you see, Richard Allen's not done. He's back in court December 20th, just right here, right down the road, right before Christmas for his sentencing. But again, it is completely dark within that courtroom. It's not going to be visual for all of us. You or I cannot watch the actual end result of the justice system that has found a man guilty by the jury of his peers. We now can't see that sentence imposed because they feel as though the courtroom needs to still be gagged. I'm ARHayes. Welcome to A Convict's Thoughts. This is never a good situation, ladies and gentlemen, when it is so closed that we, the people, remember that term because it's extremely key. Put it up here in that mind, and every time you look at your justice system, your law enforcement, your Department of Corrections, your prosecution, even all the way through the politicians, it is supposed to be we, the people. We elect these individuals to carry our best interests forward. You pay taxes out of your hard-earned paychecks. You pay a due to our country to help it work its way through each and every single day in a freedom type of way. But ladies and gentlemen, what's happening in Delphi to Richard Allen is not considered to be free. The freedom of us people. It's in the dark. How do you know? Or how would I know? Or how would the next people know what's truly happening in that courtroom if we're not allowed to even see the end result of the justice? We've been told Richard Allen's guilty. The actual courtroom was open to a select number of individuals that got to visually watch it all play out. And I believe, again, that courtroom is going to be locked down with nobody allowed in it from what I've understood by reports. I reached out to the courts to see if people would be allowed in during the sentencing, and they said no. Completely dark. So Richard Allen will be sentenced without any of us truly knowing why or what was said. I don't believe in that. I don't think that's a correct way of doing this. What is there still left to hide? The man has been deemed guilty by a jury, and that cannot be changed unless and when this goes to the Supreme Court for Appeals. Many have reached out to me. They want to know what type of road or pathway Richard Allen has before him. As many of you know, he has sat incarcerated in some of the harshest of conditions for a person that had not been found guilty as of yet. Even being placed into solitary confinement in a penitentiary before ever being found guilty of any crime. Think about that. Prison is for convicted felons that have been sentenced to the Department of Corrections for a term of so much time based upon their crime. It could be all the way up to life without the opportunity of parole or even death. But how does a innocent, not proven guilty person end up in the penitentiary before they've actually even been found guilty? That's why I use the word innocent. They are still innocent until proven guilty. Yet they sit in a penitentiary as if they had already had that hammer slammed down stating their guilt. 130 years is a long time, ladies and gentlemen. So obviously Richard Allen had been thinking about this since probably the day he was arrested, put into those cuffs, and thrown into that cold cell awaiting his move into the actual jail. I mean, booking is just the worst place until you finally get to sleep and you get it underneath your blanket of your cell. But trust me, he had no luxuries. Richard Allen was treated worse than most that go to jail. And jail is horrific. It is the worst of the worst. You would rather be in jail, unless you're Richard Allen, going into solitary confinement with absolutely no privilege, and most likely actually being abused, which people would love to argue with me about, but I've been in solitary confinement in the penitentiary, and I know not only the mental abuse that happens, but the withholding of food and other things that are not deemed privileges. You're supposed to absolutely get them. The road for Richard Allen gets no easier, ladies and gentlemen. After he was actually found guilty by the jury, he was moved back into a solitary confinement jail cell, awaiting his sentencing. He has to be removed out of the setting, away from other common jail inmates that are still deemed to be innocent. You know, like the way he should have been deemed in the first place, but wasn't. So now he will be separated into what's considered to be a DOC holding pod. It may not even be a pod, because there in Delphi, they probably have such limited space, they're going to put him into a solitary confinement cell all over again. But it should be in the actual county jail. They'll be doing his pre-sentencing report. These are where they go out and they look for mitigating and aggravating circumstances. They're all going to be put together into a file that's delivered to the judge prior to sentencing. He's going to go over these things like past arrest, past issues, anything that it could be, counseling. There's so many things that go into that report, it's hard to break it down. But anything and everything about your life will be given to that judge in the pre-sentencing report so he can best make the decision on your fate. Now, this is where Richard Allen's just up what I call shit creek. Judge Gull does not like Richard Allen. She has not been fair to him one time in the entirety of his case. Remember, this is the judge. This woman removed his attorneys from the case, and they got overturned by the Supreme Court for that, and then just went on a rampage all the way through trial. And now it's in her hands what his sentence will be. Do you think Richard Allen, sitting in his solitary confinement jail cell right here, right now, has any feeling that he could possibly get anything less than the absolute max? Do you think Richard Allen doesn't know in his head that Gull would much rather see him get the death penalty than a prison sentence? And there's a good chance when she goes over that pre-sentencing report and she weighs out the mitigating and the aggravating factors, she's going to put some sort of enhancement into his file that's going to go with him to the Department of Corrections classification department. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It sucks, but it's true. That judge could make an actual reference within that file that goes to the Department of Justice classification department, which is supposed to be done on their own self internally of the penitentiary, weighing out factors. But when a judge makes a written recommendation like that, trust me, it gets read and it gets understood and it gets implemented into their decision of how they're going to classify you. When Richard Allen receives his sentence, he will be transferred within a very short period of time from the jail back to the classification intake of the penitentiary. He does not go straight to a prison yard. He goes to a classification intake process. Sometimes it's very quick. It only takes a handful of days. And other times I've seen people take 30 to 60 to 90 days to get through it, typically depending on your mental status and your mental health. Other times it really comes down to how hard it is for them to figure out where to put you. With Richard Allen's crimes, there's only one place to put him, and it's solitary confinement in segregation for protective custody. He has no other choice, just based off of the crime. The minute an inmate, especially the affiliated white inmates, read his paperwork that showcases that 2 young underage female victims were lives taken, they were murdered in a horrific manner, they're already kind of in the eye and the hot seat. But what really puts it over, it just puts it over the fact, is the missing clothing. That right there puts it on the front page of everybody that this had a sexual tone to it, and that's all bad for Richard Allen. It doesn't matter if he was not convicted or was convicted of a sexual crime. I mean, in this case, he was not. It was not even deemed that any sexual abuse transpired in this case for what we know. But at the end of the day, because clothes were missing, the inmates are going to deem it as a sexual crime because it was 2 young females missing clothing. I've been in the penitentiary and I don't blame you, because if somebody actually gets sentenced to the penitentiary and it has this type of undertone, you take it for what it is. You don't think that it's actually something completely different and this man didn't commit the crime. You take it the man's sitting behind bars because he did. And that's how he's going to be portrayed. Richard Allen will stay in protective custody until he dies. The only way he comes out of protective custody is if the state just decides to put him in to general population. Does it happen? Yes, it does. I've seen the state attempt to move people out of protective custody and slide them in underneath the whole-way wire onto normal yards with bogus paperwork. I've seen it happen, but trust me, those individuals get caught in a heartbeat. Richard Allen is going to be heard in the Supreme Court for an appeal. You just don't know when or how long it will take. The paperwork's been filed, trust me. The minute he got found guilty of the charges, the paperwork was in motion. It's being turned into the appeals, and you have a time frame you have to do it in anyway, but his lawyers were already, I guarantee you, prepared for it. It doesn't mean that Richard Allen's appeal hearing will be heard in 2025. It doesn't mean it will be heard in 2026, 27, 28. It could be 35 before it gets heard. Some are quick, some are not. I've literally had a case that I was sentenced on, serving time, not go up for appeal, when I had a second case that was sentenced on after the fact in the penitentiary that went to appeal before the first one did. It was all a crumble junk. Who knows if Richard Allen will even get his appeal heard. They can deny it. If they deem that the courts and everybody did it by the book and everything was done correctly, there will be no appeal. In the Delphi case, there's going to be an appeal. And there's going to have a heard appeal. Just don't know when. But I will tell you, I do not see any possibility of the case against Richard Allen being overturned. I think he could go back into the courtroom and have another trial. But I don't think the state's going to just let it go if somehow his charges got turned over and his conviction overthrown. He'll be right back in square one, going to court again, going to trial. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know that's not what you wanted to hear, because there are many out there that truly feel as though Richard Allen is the wrong suspect. He's not the right person that was either put on trial or convicted of this crime. And I feel for you, because it didn't make a lot of sense to me either, and I do not like our court system doing things in the dark. And I've never quite heard of a sentencing being done completely closed. Never heard of that. Brand new to me. Never seen it. Never heard it. I'm going to be doing a lot of research into that, because I don't think it's right. Appreciate you joining me. It was fun talking about another case out there in true crime. I think we need to look at a few others, like the Karen Reed situation. I still want to do a little more work into the old Memphis 3, if you remember that case at all. It's quite interesting. I'm learning a lot as I'm deep diving into that, and boy, it's eye-opening, even because of the fact you could put a lot of those things out towards other cases. Appreciate you again. Have a great night. I'm ARHayes, A Convict's Thoughts. I'm outie for the